All right, Yana, it looks like we are now recording, so feel free to start.
Okay, so good evening, everyone from Russia. Welcome and thank you for joining the Global Arctic Youth Network for this webinar. This current webinar is part of the series of presentations which are discussing key issues facing the Arctic and communities around the world. My name is Yana Kachenyuk. Today, I and my colleague Anastasia Fedoseeva would like to talk about Russian Arctic and ecological issues we are dealing with. Arctic is in all senses is really a prospective area. That is why all the economic, political, and military resources are directed to increasing Russian presence in Arctic. We would like to divide our webinar in 4 parts. First of all, we will talk about Russian Arctic in general, why Russia wants to dominate in the Arctic region. Secondly, we want to share about all the existing Russian projects. After that, we will talk about how all the projects affect climate and all the consequences. Finally, Anastasia will share what measures are taken against climate change in the Arctic region by the Russian government and its citizens. The Russian Arctic extends west to east for nearly 7,000 kilometers from the Kola Peninsula to Nenets and the Chicken Peninsula in the Russian far west. The islands and archipelagos in the Arctic Sea also form part of the Russian Arctic. North of the Arctic Circle, the Russian Arctic is mainly barren tundra or permafrost. The subsoil is permanently frozen, and so the only natural vegetation are mosses, lichens, and low shrubs. So what makes this all ice-covered area so interesting and tempting for Russia? First of all, Arctic Shelf is one of the biggest untouched areas in the world by hydrocarbon stocks, which mostly only Russia owns. When we're talking about the numbers, the Arctic may contain as much as 90 billion barrels of the oil and 47 trillion cubic meters of natural gas. That is equivalent to 14% of Russia's oil and 40% of its gas reserves. However, so far on the Barents, Pechora, and Kara seas have begun to be explored. So secondly, transportation. The development on the Northern Sea route is one of the main tasks for settling in the Arctic. Soon it will become the key to the development of the Russian Arctic regions of the Far East. The Arctic route from Southeast Asia to Europe cuts transportation time in half compared to traditional routes through the Suez and Panama canals. In Soviet times, it was used mainly to supply goods to isolated settlements in the Arctic. In 1991, the Northern Sea route was open to international shipping. Through unofficial Russian documents, it was defined as a historically established national transport communication. Meanwhile, Northern Sea route is becoming increasingly accessible due to global warming, not only for the ice-breaking fleet. Finally, defending capacity. The development of military infrastructure and the strengthening of a permanent military presence in the Russian Federation will not only enhance the defense capability, but will also allow the army to retain its competitive advantages. Now we're heading to the second part of our webinar, and we'll talk about Russian projects in the Arctic region. With $300 billion in potential, $300,000 billion in potential projects either completed, in motion, or proposed, Russia is the clear leader in Arctic infrastructure development. The world's largest country has moved to reopen some abandoned Soviet-era military installations and place new facilities and airfields in its northern territory, while also establishing a string of seaports along its northern coastline. Prime Minister Dmitry Medvedev signed a decree in 2016 which confirms his government's commitment to a total of 73 projects. The Murmansk Transport Hub. The infrastructure object which includes the construction of a railway line along the western bank of the Kola Bay. Several major industrial projects are planned in the area, among the Novatek's plant for construction of modules for Arctic gas installations. Novatek's plant. The new yard will produce large capacity platforms and modules for floating liquefied natural gas plants in the Arctic. This project will be given the maximum level of support within the frames of the regional investment legislation. The new yard will be located near the village of Belokamenka and is to be completed in year 2019. The project will cost about 25 billion rubles and create 6,000 new jobs. The Prirazlomne. This project is currently the only Russian hydrocarbon production project implemented on the Arctic shelf. The Prirazlomne offshore ice-resistant oil production platform is the field's main facility. The Prirazlomne oil field was discovered in 1989. It is located on the Fedoseeva shelf, 60 kilometers off the shore, at a water depth of 19 to 20 meters. Prirazlomne contains over 70 million tons of oil, with a potential production level of some 5.5 million tons per year. In 2016, the field produced 2.2 million tons of oil.
So we can't hear anything. I'm not certain if there should be noise right now.
Yeah, there should be.
Okay. So Anastasia, if this is playing on your computer, just turn on the sound on your phone and then put the phone next to the item creating the noise. So turn your phone off of mute. Anastasia says that there is no sound on this video. Okay, never mind.
Okay, so let's move on. The EU sanctions stopped Russian oil and gas operations in the Arctic and affected negatively the country's entire oil sector. On the other hand, sanctions have a good impact on the climate of the Arctic region. Russia needs European technologies for offshore drilling. The sanctions affected the sector and froze development. Sanctions of the EU and the US were imposed in 2014 after a cession of Crimea and beginning on the conflict in the southeast of Ukraine. Nuclear-powered icebreakers. Russia's nuclear-powered icebreaker Ural is expected to be floated out in St. Petersburg in late May 2019. Ural is one of the Russia's icebreakers, which are the world's largest and most powerful vessels of their kind, fitted with two specifically designed nuclear-powered reactors. The new vessels will be able to escort convoys in the Arctic and break up thick ice. Arctica and Sibir have already been launched, and Ural is currently being constructed in the shipyard, which will be launched in May 2019 and ready for use in 2021. Cost of each icebreaker is about $2 billion. Military bases. Russia has 4 fully functioning military bases in its polar regions. One has been built on the island of Alexanderland, the westernmost major island of the Franz Josef archipelago, another on the Wrangel Island in Russia's far east, and 2 more on the New Siberian Islands archipelago. The military are also completing the construction of an airfield on the Franz Josef archipelago, said to be capable of accommodating airplanes all year round by 2020. Trefoil Base, located on the island of Alexanderland, occupies an area of 14,000 square meters, allows up to 100 people to live and work there for as long as a year, in a hub without any external support. The base has its own power station as well as a water purification plant capable of producing drinking quality water out of snow. A standard version of its anti-aircraft system can hit its targets at a distance up to 15 kilometers and a height of up to 10 kilometers and could remain functional at temperatures ranging from 50 degrees above zero to 50 degrees below zero. Recently, Russian engineers have developed a new version that can operate under even harsher conditions. Now, I guess Anastasia can lead this webinar.
No, we can't, Anastasia. So
And now?
yes, we can hear you, Anastasia.
Oh, yes, great. Hello, everyone.
You're very quiet. If you wouldn't mind getting a bit closer to the microphone.
Okay. Is it better now?
Yes, it is. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will just be closer to the microphone. Okay. So now I'm going to talk about the transition to renewable energy in the Arctic region that is leading by our government. And this is the list of the regions that are currently working on this transition. So this is the all the names, and here you can see Arkhangelsk, Murmansk region, and yeah, Yakutsk region. I don't know if you see, yeah, and the Kamchatsk region, Yamalo-Nenets Autonomous District, Taimyr Municipality, Sakha Republic or Yakutia, and Chukotsky Autonomous District or Chukotka. So here all of them, and let's talk now about the solar energy. So in the Russian Arctic, it could be roughly divided into the small and large. Small solar energy is in progress. In Murmansk Oblast, panels are used as an additional element of the wind and solar units, which are combined with diesel generators in villages to power public payphones and navigation lighthouses. In Yana, Gazprom has been using more than 200 solar units to power gas wells control equipment. In Arkhangelsk Oblast, where I'm from, solar panels are combined with small wind turbines to power road lighting. There is a small wind and solar units at an Arctic station in the Kara Sea. However, it cannot address the problem of energy supply to off-grid settlements. And now about large. So large solar energy sector is well progressing only in Yakutia, where the potential is much higher than in other parts of the Russian Arctic. To a certain extent, the problem is that the highest electricity demand is observed in winter, when lighting is needed during the polar night, but solar panels cannot work. Therefore, during the polar day, solar units must yield diesel fuel savings sufficiently large to spread the effect for the whole year. So there is no wonder that only sunny Yakutia is demonstrating good progress, with ARAO S Vostok energy utility proceeding from the construction of medium capacity solar units. So it's about roughly 10 to 100 kilowatts. And to large plants of more than 1 million kilowatts. So the first such plant is working in Batai, and there are plans to build units in Kugia, so in Alenyok and Zhigansk. And yes, and now about wind power. So the use of wind was attempted more than once, but the accumulation of positive experience in the Russian Arctic has just started. Extreme climate conditions are the region-specific feature for the most of the Russian Arctic. So despite the large wind potential, a number of attempts had failed until pilot project of the last years, when the special equipment were specifically designed for operations in this area. On the other hand, the attempts in spots with insufficient wind were no more successful, as nearly all generated electricity was consumed by the unit itself. So the most positive experience was somewhat intermediate installation of wind diesel or wind solar diesel units in localities with a relatively mild climate, yet with good wind. So it was in such environment that wind diesel units were successfully launched in Kamchatka, and wind solar units combined with modern diesel generators in Murmansk Oblast. The later resulted in a reduced tariff in a remote village on the White Sea coast. Now, local businesses started paying 13 cents instead of 30. So it's like a ruble equivalence. So it's just too early to speak about the elimination of residential subsidies. But it is obviously an incentive to the businesses. So another type of wind energy includes units for extremely severe climates. It's only recently that such experience accumulation has been launched specifically in Amderma, Tixki, and yes, so which have been put on probation for success, provided the wind units can work for 2 or 3 years without failures. And so this elevate the changes for building additional plants. And the main area in Yakutia, where energy utility Vostoka actively cooperates with local government and Japanese partners. It is also practically planned in Murmansk Oblast, Yana, Chukotka, and Kamchatsky Krai, where the regional governments and energy utilities could be among active implements. There are also plants in Arkhangelsk Oblast, where, while as a whole region mainly relies on Tiber biomass. And now, since I'm from Arkhangelsk region and we have been working recently on the implementing solar panels in the Kinozero National Park, I will show you a short video about it.
There's so many nice things happening
Do you hear the sound on the video?
Also on the ground here in Russia and some other Soviet, post-Soviet Union countries.
We do. It's just very quiet again.
Where the village in the Arkhangelsk region called Teknova.
Oh, let me try one. Maybe it will be.
Shift the energy towards the clean energy and commit to 100% renewable energy. It's a very complicated region because it's very far away, very remote.
Okay.
And the grid is almost not
working.
Is
it better now?
It's working. It's
the sound, was it better now? Yeah, let's try one more time. I think it's
so
really
many
better.
nice things happening in countries over the world, and we try to push those things also on the ground here in Russia and some other Soviet, post-Soviet Union countries. And in Russia specifically, we had this amazing campaign where the village in the Arkhangelsk region called Teknova has been decided to shift the energy towards the clean energy and commit to 100% renewable energy. It's a very complicated region because it's very far away, very remote, and they have a grid, but the grid is almost not working. And if it's working, it's very hard to rely on. So it's much easier to just put solar panels or windmill and then use this.
Okay. Yes.
There's so many nice things happening.
And recently it was in. So now the Arctic area is protected by the government. So there is a national park called Russian Arctic, Ruskaya Arktika. So now we're gonna watch again a short video about it. Oh, you can see the video?
Sorry, but no, we don't.
Oh, okay. It's something weird with this. Okay, can you see it now in this mode? Because when I'm trying to play, do you see it now?
Yes, we do. Thank you.
Okay. So the Russian Arctic National Park, so it's a national park of Russia, and it was established in June of 2009. It was expanded in 2016, and it covers a large and remote area of the Arctic Ocean. The northern part of Novaya Zemlya, it's an island, and Franz Josef Land. So you can see the beautiful wildlife, and the park is regarded as one of the most well-established protected areas for marine mammals in the nation, and existence of bowheads and gray whales in the area make the park's ecological value to be extraordinary. Also, Vladimir Putin expressed his hopes that the national park could help develop tourism in this area. This video was made by our great a local photographer and video maker, Nikolai Gernet. So yeah, also I would like to add that there are many projects that are happening right now and many nice things. And there are many ecological environmental movements that focuses on the environmental issues of Arctic, such as 42 environmental movement in Arkhangelsk, and PIM, it means nature and use, природа и молодежь, in Murmansk. And but since it's very remote, it's not very easy to visit Arctic, but there is one project that happens yearly. It's called what's called SHIP University. So the students of the Arctic Federal University every year are going to the expedition with the scientists and the professors, and it's 100 days, and they go into the Arctic and they making their research, they're working on this, they taking pictures, photographs, and helping scientists on their projects. So this is what's happening now in Russia amongst the government and the citizens in terms of the positive changes in the Russian Arctic. So to sum it up, I would say that we are working now on the renewable energy, solar and solar panels, windmills, and also the regions are moving their energy towards the clean energy. And yeah, the national park, which was expanded 2 years ago, just 2 years ago. I think it's great that we are doing this now, but I guess we need to work much more on it. So that's why we have this great Arctic Youth Network. And I hope that you liked our presentation and you enjoyed that. So I would like to say thank you very much for your attention. Спасибо за внимание. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask me or Yana.
All right, thank you both very much. As a lot of people hopefully know, I live in Alaska. My name is Hillary, and we have a lot of really interesting things happening between our two countries. So this has been a lot of fun for me, just to hear your take on what it is that your country does in the Arctic. So thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you for attention. Thank you.
No worries. All right, so I'm going to open this up to any questions. So if anybody has anything that they would like to ask of these two young ladies living in Russia, feel free to either turn off mute on your phone and call it out, or type it into the chat box and I can read it. I have access to both of those, so yeah.
Hi, this is Peter in Iceland. I just wanted to ask, do you know how many people live in Russia north of the Arctic Circle? And also maybe, do you know how many different groups and cultures of indigenous people live across the whole, because it's such a big region?
Yes, I can, if you give me just 1 second, I need to check the numbers, so I will not give you the wrong information. And so but I can say you now that the biggest city under the polar circle in Russia is Murmansk, and I think it's roughly 100,000 people. But let's see how many people, you mean in the whole Arctic region of Russia, right?
Yes.
And we, in Murmansk Oblast, we have Sami people, but also we have much more indigenous people. I will just check.
This is Hillary. I don't know very much about the Sami people. I know that they herd reindeer or caribou, depending on if they're domesticated or not. Can you guys share a little bit about the Sami and what it is that they do?
Oh, yes, this is the indigenous people, folk, and they live in Russia, Finland, Sweden, and Norway, and they consider themselves as their union. They don't consider themselves as Russians on the regions of Finns or Swedish people. They consider themselves as Sami people, and Sami, they have their own language, but also they have dialects. So there are 12 dialects of Sami language. And for example, South Sami dialect, it would be very hard to understand North Sami. It's like a huge difference between all these dialects. And of course, Russian Sami, they use Cyrillic alphabet, not the Latin one. And yeah, they believe that reindeer is their god, and it's the main source of life for them. And this is really nature people, I would say. They live close to nature. I think they consider themselves as nature. They not think about them like the part of nature. They just are nature. So that's what I know about Sami. I just like a personal experience because I know a lot of Sami people.
And like National Geographic made like in your article, like have written an article about them. So the point is that Gazprom is trying to have their they want to have gas there, like have this line, and now a lot of reindeers and a lot of people are not used to it. So they kind of like try to find new ways of where they can find like this grass for the reindeers. And also Gazprom takes their children to the cities once per year to teach them, so to educate them. So in September they come to like their villages with the helicopters and take some kids to the city. And I have read some stories that these children like not used to their social life and then try to escape in the wood, but then they still get found and like taken from their parents. But in the summer, like at the end, in the beginning of the summer, they're brought back to their parents. So
I think I'm getting closer to find answer on your question, Peter.
And about like how many people are living in the Arctic, there are about like 4 million people. And these people, like Russian Arctic is the most populated from other like parts. So yeah, 4 million lives there.
Okay, so about the people also who live in Arctic, we have a Pomor. It's an ethnic group of Russian North, and also we have Yakut. It's about 500,000 people. We have Dolgan. It's roughly about 7,000 people, and also we have Evenki or Evene, and Karyali people, Nyansi, Nyanets people, Chukcha, Chukchi, Koreki, and other. So this is, I can write you a list of them in Russian and English, because the pronunciation may be a little bit different.
Thank you. Anastasia, once again, if you wouldn't mind getting a bit closer to the microphone, I'm so sorry. It's slightly hard to hear you.
Built in my computer, but I think now it's better, right?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Okay, good.
So yeah, it actually sounds like the Sami are similar to Alaska Natives. The majority of people who are from Alaska do not like to be called Alaska Natives. They like to be called their tribal names. So we have Tlinkits down in southeast Alaska. We have a lot of Inupiat, and it's really quite fascinating to go chat with them and to find out their language and all that stuff. So it's crazy how we're so far away, but we have so much in common.
Yes. That's so great.
All right. So once again, if anybody has any questions.
So I have one question. Anastasia, you mentioned that the Sami in Russia use the Cyrillic alphabet.
Yes.
And that you know many of them. Do you know how it is for them? I mean, like you said, that even the North and the South Sami languages are quite different. Like, how also does it affect that they're also using a different alphabet?
How it affects their life? You mean?
Like Sami communicating Sami in Russia and Sami in Norway, and how that kind of adds to, I guess, like a complication.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good question. You're right. The life of Sami people is really difficult, and these differences between this small community make it even harder. And also Sami language is dying language. So, but they trying to preserve it, and they have a school, so they teach this language to their kids. So they really want Sami people to actually speak on this language. But as I said, it's hard for the South Sami to understand North Sami. So I'm not quite sure, but I guess on their parliament that located in Norway, they're using, I don't know, the most common Sami dialect, you know, like something like Bukmol. Yes, or maybe, because they don't use English as their working language in their parliament. That's what I know. But all of them, of course, they have to speak Russian if they live in Russia, or if it's a Norwegian Sami, they have to speak Norwegian or Swedish, Finnish, and etc. Right? But I would say the main difficulties for them is because their community is so small, and it's maybe hard for them to speak up and make people hear their problems and issues. And I think that's how I see this, at least.
Thank you. And do you know how Sami, like how many they are in total and how they are distributed between the borders of like Russia and Sweden and Norway and Finland?
Yeah.
Like, is there a majority in one region, or are they evenly spread?
Yeah, so in total, it's 80,000 in total, and in Norway it's 37,000, in Sweden 20,000, in Finland about 6,000, in Russia less than 2,000, and 1,600 of Russian Sami live in Murmansk. So the majority of Russian Sami in Murmansk, and also in Ukraine it's like 100 Sami. So, but I guess they just moved from Russia to Ukraine. So yeah, the majority of Sami live in Norway. So, and in total 80,000 Sami people in the world.
Kind of makes you wonder if they recognize country boundaries as something that they need to be aware of. Because quite honestly, in Alaska, there's a lot of different people who span the U.S. as well as Canada. And I'm assuming also on the on the island that we share with Russia, we might have a few groups of people who span the U.S. as well as Russia.
Yeah, and so you mentioned Sami in Ukraine. Is that recent or a long time ago that they moved there?
Yeah, I don't really know why Sami people moved to Ukraine, and and this is the data that it was 136 Sami people in Ukraine in 2001. So I don't know how it is now because it's been a lot of time ago. But I can check for you and maybe ask my Sami friends if they know anything about it. But it's, you know, it's like so small amount that lives in Ukraine. But my guess that they just moved for some reason. Maybe they had relatives there or something like this. So maybe it was easier for them because it, you know, it's hard to live in Murmansk region. It's a polar region, and yeah, I think maybe they just moved there. Maybe also maybe they moved during the Soviet Union because it was like the same country. It was no boundaries between the Soviet republics, so maybe they just moved there before the Soviet Union crashed.
Oh, thank you. And also, I was wondering, what would you say are the most important environmental issues in either different regions of the Russian Arctic or the Russian Arctic as a whole?
I would say that it's a problem with trash because the thing is the Russia is so huge and we can use our land for the, what's it called, like we yeah, I think that's the main, as I see it, is the main issue because we just we cut our forest and we just put a lot of garbage there. That's happening right now. For example, it was recently ecological catastrophe in Moscow region, and people were against having more landfills. So the Moscow government just decided to move all the trash that Moscow produced now and Moscow region to the Komi Republic and Archangelsk region. And so they cut down the forest, a very valuable forest, and they just gonna collect all the trash there. And it's a lot of territory. It's a huge territory. So as I see, it's a huge problem now, a huge environmental problem because deforestation, you know, it's very bad. It's protection from the wind, and it's water preservation, and it's air. It's like everything. And also, it's since it's very valuable forest, virgin forest, and it's very unique ecological system, and it's very easy to destroy, and it's almost impossible to renew it. For example, if they're gonna plant trees again, it will never be the same. So I would say that. And also I would say pollution, oil pollution, because the main source of our of money and the main economy in Russia is oil production, and it's not clean production in Russia, in the Murmansk, in the Arctic region, and yeah, in any other regions, in the Arctic, for example. Now, Yana was mentioning it.
Yeah,
so
and I would
say.
Yeah, I wanted to add that as for me, I think the global warming is like the most important ecological issue we're dealing with. And like what annoys me the most and like makes me kind of pretty disappointed that Russia sees this global warming as a benefit, because now it's not as hard to get through the Northern Sea route, and also at the same time it's easier to get to the places where we can, like, it's easier to find oil, and like it's better for the military defensive capacity, and all these ecological problems with the Arctic is good for economical and financial and for Russia. Like it's good for Russia, like Russia sees it as a good thing happening to Arctic. Yeah, that's what I think actually.
Yeah, and also in the Arctic region, in the Arctic, there was a lot of pollution with the radioactive waste. So I think this problem goes to the pollution and garbage, and because the radioactive waste, I don't need to explain you that it's a very dangerous waste. It's not like a regular waste that humans produce, but it's actually from the nuclear power stations or the nuclear fossil fuel, for example.
Thank you. I mean, it's mind-blowing to hear about cutting down a natural forest just to use as a landfill.
Yes,
I've never heard about that before. On that, I was wondering, how are in Russia, like, how are the environmental protection laws? Like, did that need to go through some process, or was it just a decision that was made without any discussion, or like, how do you know how it happened?
Can you repeat this question? The first part, I didn't hear that.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, yeah, do you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Okay, great. So I'm wondering, like, they cut this forest as a landfill, but do you know about like environmental protection law? Like, was that a very short process of getting a permit, or were there some conflicts about it, or do you know anything regarding that?
Yes, so this was really short process, because I think it happened last year. Yana, can you correct me? Can you remember when this happened in the Moscow region, the small town that close to the Moscow? I can't remember the name. I think it's happened this year, maybe last year. And then it was a lot of people were against it because they couldn't breathe, you know, because it was a very, very bad smell, and it's the nature around this town was basically destroyed. So yeah, since it was a catastrophe and a really urgent matter, people were like outside on the meetings, and I think the government just made very quick decision just to make people calm down. So it will not be like a small revolution. And they just found the easiest way. It's not, so I think they just wanted to fix this problem as fast as possible, and they didn't think about the future. Yeah, and this decision was made up by the government, and people didn't even know about it. We just now getting some information from environmental activists or from like regular people. They just sharing this information on social media. So that's why it was a shock for me that I didn't hear about it on the national news or on official source of information. It was just on social media, and when we checked it, it was true. So, but there is a law, the 42 paragraph in our constitution, that everyone has a right to have a clean and a good environment. But of course, it's now what they're doing, it's against the law. But I think they found the way how to make it by the law, but actually it's not. So it's a very complicated and difficult matter. But now activists and people trying to change the decision. And of course, nobody wants that. Nobody wants to lose their forest. But I don't know how easy it would be to be against the government, since the decision is already made, and they already gave budget for this project to start cut down the trees and build up these landfills. So yeah, that's my answer.
So in the Russian constitution, okay. I wanted to say that in Russian constitution there are like 84 laws about the environment, and all of they are focused on just legislation. And like what I mean is some words, not what we should actually make. And for example, like every person has right for clean environment, and every person has, this is just like what I'm reading from the constitution, every person has right for clean air, and that's all. Not some measures which, like, not certain measures which should be taken by the firms or by their fabrics organizations. Nothing certain, just words or something that should be done, but not what is actually implemented. That's the problem. Like, even if they're going to say something, like ministers of natural resources and ecology will say that I don't know, make a law about the environment with certain measures, but no one is gonna follow them, and it will be never implemented because it's not financially good for people. They're not interested in it, especially businesses, and no one supports these laws.
Okay, so basically, like, the emphasis is on economical development, but not looking at the social or environmental aspect of sustainable development, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's the main focus is the economy, and in short term, not even in a long term. It's also a good example would be because it was a big fight between environmentalists and the forest industry in Arctic region. They wanted to cut down the virgin forests, that the last virgin forest in the whole Europe, and it's Dvinsko-Pinyashki National Park. But now they finally made a decision. They made a national park, but of course it's much smaller than was planned. So what they do, the main argument is they need jobs for people. But they don't understand when they will cut down all the trees in, for example, 10 or 20 years, there are not going to be any trees left. So there will not be any jobs for them, for people. So we will not have any jobs. We will have an economical crisis, and we will not have any trees. And it's not a regular trees. It's very valuable and precious trees. And also since it's virgin forest, it's very unique ecological system. As I mentioned before, it will be impossible to plant these trees again and have the same system. So yeah, they think only in economical terms and in short term. They don't even think how economical situation gonna be in 50 years for people, like, or in 100 years, you know. They just
Thank you so much, Anastasia.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
Yeah, same in the US.
Oh, yes. So you see, we have so much in common in our government.
Yeah, yeah, same here in Iceland, even though our image is a bit different. But I was wondering, so could you say again the name of the town, and did you say that they have not started cutting the forest yet, or?
Oh yeah, I can find. So this is going to be in Arctic region, and I think it's called. I can find this. Yeah, I found the name of this place in Arctic region where they're gonna cut down the trees. Or you mean the national park or the landfill?
Oh, the landfills.
Okay. Yes. It's a Lenski district of Arctic region, and it's Urdom, I think it's called. Yeah.
Okay,
So
but they have not started yet.
Yeah, I think they started, or they plan to start very, very soon, because I think they now preparing everything for that. As I heard that they now moving all the cars, all these like techniques, and the moving people who are gonna do that. So they're preparing everything for cutting down the trees. And this is, yeah, so this is the news that I'm reading now, the news from the 17th of August. So it's been like almost 1 month ago. So I think maybe now they started, yeah, I think they started to cut down the trees already. But the people, they didn't know, they just started to cut down the trees. And the local people, they just found out it from the workers who start to do that. And they just told them, oh, you know, it's going to be a landfill for the Moscow garbage. And then they started to spread the information.
Wow, that's crazy.
So, but when people found out, okay. I think they always just trying to calm people down and probably lie to them or give them false information and saying that we will ask you first, we'll have a public voting process or something like that. But as I read in another source, on the 20th of August, 56 trains with the garbage from Lubirsk was going to Archangelsk region. So, as you can see, it's not a positive situation at all.
Yeah, it's quite a lot.
Yeah, that's a lot.
But yeah, but so maybe I guess it's going to be probably a last question. But what are like the positive things happening with environmental issues in like the Russian Arctic, like something that has been working well recently?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think it's important to end up on a positive note. Yeah, I'm working myself with the environmental movements here, and I can see here that people became now much more aware of environmental issues, and now we are talking about it. For example, 5 years ago, we couldn't imagine having an environmental forum in Archangelsk, or recently it was in climate forum in Moscow. And it was a great event that I attended. So now I think the most important that people now became more environmentally friendly, or at least they start think about it, we start talk about it. Also, as a best results that was done by the environmental movement here in Archangelsk, that they start recycle in Archangelsk, in the city of Archangelsk, and now it's about 200 places where you can come and recycle your waste, and it's very easy to do. You just call to the company and they gonna bring this recycling bin and they gonna implement it for free, and they're gonna take the garbage also for free for the recycling. So I think it's a very great thing because like, yeah, I think 5 years ago nobody was talking about it, and now it's a lot of places where you can recycle in Archangelsk. And also this project with the solar panel that I showed you, and it was done last summer, and I think it worked pretty well, because now this guest house in Fedoseeva National Park is working on the clean energy, and people, the Fedoseeva Park is very popular park in Archangelsk region. It's very touristy places. So a lot of tourists are coming to this house and staying with this family, and they see that, okay, there is a renewable energy in Archangelsk region. So it's, as I say, for the renewable energy, it's very slow process, but something is happening, and more and more people aware. So for me, I think that's the most important, that people became really interested in it and they really want to do something. Yeah. So the main results, I would say, this is that we started to recycle in Archangelsk region, and that that the movement, ecological environmental movements or organizations, they're growing and they have more volunteers or people who are helping them. So I think that, yeah, that's the most positive changes in the Arctic region in terms of environment.
Okay, great. And do you think maybe now the both local and national government are maybe starting to shift more towards sustainable development?
Yeah, so yeah, as I said recently, I was in this climate forum, and it was a lot of representatives from the national government, and which made me really happy, because Moscow now is becoming yeah, they moving towards clean energy. They have now the electrobus. They have planted a lot of trees. They have national parks in the cities, and it was very valuable and precious plants. So Moscow is working on it. But the thing is with Russia that first everything happened in Moscow, and then it's spreading out to the regions. So if we can see that now in Moscow, that we have these climate forums, that we even have a newspaper that write only about environmental issues or problems, and that we have these electrobuses that they plant. I think they planted a few million trees this year, and they plan to plant more and more. And they working now on making bicycle routes so people can use more bicycles. And also they have car sharing now in Moscow. So, which makes me really happy and thinking that, okay, positive changes are gonna come then to regions, because the Moscow is just like the best example in Russia. Yeah, so I think that now government, you know, it's kind of that they have to do it yesterday and they're a bit late, so they're trying to do, because honestly speaking, I still think that it's not enough. That's not how we want, but at least they start to do something. And it's I think it's better than nothing. But we need to be more pushy, and people need to talk more about it, because I think if locals will not talk and ask their government, our government, for this, like no change is going to happen. But since now there are a lot of businesses that want to be like green and yeah, organizations, citizens, businesses, and they want to work together with the government. So yeah, I think there is a dialect that started.
Yes, great. Yeah, and we've been seeing basically the same trend in Iceland, because yeah, it was also very focused on short-term economical development, but now all of a sudden, both the government and companies and the public are, yeah, really moving in this direction.
Same thing in the U.S. We're honestly seeing a lot of state governments implement a lot more governmental controls on climate change and all that stuff. So that was the last question that we have time for. Thank you all for joining us today. This has been a presentation from the Global Arctic Youth Network, where we are working to shape the future of the Arctic. Join us next week for a seminar from Greenland right before our upcoming Arctic Youth Summit in Rovaniemi, Finland, to help us share our vision of the Arctic with the world. So once again, thank you, Anastasia and Yana.
Thank you very much.